like to say that community is anywhere where people gather with a shared intention. But the reality is that's not always the case, and frankly, it's hardly the full picture. So before we dive into it, my name is Danielle. Vibrant Systems is my way of helping build communities, helping deepen connections, not only to other people, but also to ourselves and to the environments that we live in. So thank you for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy this video. Okay, so back into it. Community intention is not the full picture. It is an important part of the picture. If you go and access my Transforming Communities guidebook, whether it's the paid or free version, I'll throw the links below, you will find that community intention is the first step. Why are we gathering? What shared passion or interest is drawing us together? And I think this is especially true if we're building a community from a point of self first. So for example, if I wanted to build a community around a personal interest of mine, like gardening, for example, then that shared interest, communicating that shared interest, that intention, is a really big part of drawing in people who share that same intention, share that same interest or passion. So I don't want to say that community intention is not an important part of the story, because it is. However, community, real community, living community, resilient community exists even when we can't feel that intention, even when we're swamped with challenges or obstacles. Real community may be brought together by that intention, but the glue is something totally different. And this is what makes your sports team or your gardening club an actual living community, as opposed to just a club that people gather at once a week. A community should be, and it isn't always this case, but I feel such a strong pull and move towards this way of being in community with one another, should be based in reciprocity, should be based in relationship and understanding, should honor the diversity of the people who are part of that community. Right now, at least where I'm at in my little bubble that I live in, most of the communities I see are not that. They're brought together in space. They might have an intention that brings them together, but the connections don't go beyond that entirely. And I'm not saying this is the case for everyone. Of course, we all have social networks and ties that may be more reciprocal or grounded or living, dynamic than some others, right? Like, that is possible. So if you are in one of those social networks, congrats, that's huge, that's wonderful, that's amazing. And if you're not, don't worry, you're not alone in feeling this kind of isolation, because it is an isolation that I have felt for a lot of my life. And it is because I have felt that isolation that I care as deeply about community building now as I do. So if community intention is not all that, if community intention is not what makes a community, then what else do we need? Very briefly, I'll go through the steps that I include in my Transforming Communities guidebook. So that first step is intention. Get clear on why we're gathering together. But the second step is, okay, what values does our community need to embody in order to help this intention grow, to help this intention thrive? So for the example with a sports team, maybe the intention is to introduce more people to this sport. And so for values for that, we need to be inclusive. We need to honor diversity and the different pathways that people are going to come to us through. We need to be curious and honor the process of learning and growing into the skills for that team. Now, if the intention of that sports team is to win, you're not going to be as inclusive to beginners or people who've never heard of the game before, right? So our values and intention are very intertwined. And if they're very intertwined, that means that the actions we're taking, the choices we're making, should be grounded in those values. And if it's not grounded in those values that are helping your intention come into being, then frankly, you're replicating and bringing into being an intention that may or may not be true to that original one. And this is why we need to talk about it. That's why it's a second step in the Transforming Communities Guidebook. From there, I get to walk you through how to vision. What do you actually want to build through this community? And what's your mission then? What impact are you making, and what are the pathways for that? And it's only after we've done all of that intangible visioning, imagination, grounding work that we move into, okay, what are the goals? What is the strategy? How are we measuring this? How do we move it into a strategic plan? It's a valuable thing to have. It's a good guideline to have. I very strongly believe in finding the clarity before we go and try and make that plan. Otherwise, that plan, those measurements, those goals are going to be dictated by people who may not even care about our community intention. You know, if your intention as a sports team is to be inclusive and introduce people to the sport, you can't be letting the rival sports team in the town next over tell you that you have to embody these goals about winning or membership or so on, right? Now, all that's fine and good. It's a wonderful resource. If you want to check out the Transforming Communities Guidebook, there's a free version below. There's the option to pay for a version so you can actually move through these reflections in a more engaged way. But it's not the whole thing. It's not the whole deal. Because that intention, that fire that brings us into a gathering place is one dimension. And the reality is there's around 4, there might be more, but we're going to go with 4 dimensions of community building. And if you've followed my content for a while, especially recently, you're going to recognize these 4 dimensions. Now, the first one, that fire, I already said it, that intention, that passion, that reason for being there is associated with more that spiritual, intangible, energetic purpose, right? And that's great. That's important. But if it's not grounded, if it's not embodied, it can disappear like that. And I know this because I'm a creative person, and if I don't actually take the time to act on the ideas I get, such as recording this video when I'm recording it, those ideas disappear. That inspiration disappears. And community building is very much the same. If we want the community to exist, even without that passion, we have to look at the other facets of community building. And what are those other facets? Well, let's get into it. The first, or second, I should say, because we already talked about the fire, the passion, is how do we communicate? How do we draw people into this community? How do we tell them what our intention is? And through those communications, through those beliefs and conversations and the way we handle arguments and conflicts, that creates a lot of connection. It's mental connection, and on that level, we can associate that mental connection with air, for example. It's invisible. How we communicate is invisible, but the effects are there, right? And if we're a community that's seeking to be expansive, to draw in new people, we need to be able to communicate openly. We need to be open to new ideas and perspectives. Or, like air, we're going to get stagnant. We're going to be that stuffy room that's been closed for weeks or months on end, and nobody really wants to spend time in there because it stinks. I really like the 4 elements as a way to understand these different elements of ourselves or communities, because not only do they give us such strong imagery to imagine these intangible facets of self, but they help us really explore these facets in balance as well. I tend to liken personal development and community development to an ecosystem. Look at the earth, look at a thriving ecosystem, a wetland, even a desert, a forest. How do these different elements exist in balance? In the forest, for example, at least the forests around me, wildfires, yes, are destructive. I'm not going to belittle the destruction and trauma that has come from recent wildfires where I live in Alberta, Canada. But it is also a part of the life cycles of the evergreen trees in those forests. They need the fire in order to have new saplings because their seeds are released in that heat. So we can see how important even something that can be seen as destructive is to balance an ecosystem. That's a little bit of a tangent. If you want to explore these different elements and how they relate to personal growth more, I do that in my video course, Elements of Self. It is what has transformed my life completely in just a couple of years. It's helped me understand myself and what my authentic balance is in a totally different way. The link for that is also below, so check it out if you're called. Now, back to community building. We talked about fire, we talked about air, so that's the passion, again, the intention, and the ways we communicate, how we draw people in, how we share our ideas. The next step, and this one, I've worked in community building spaces for a decade now. This one has been forgotten in most of those spaces because it's uncomfortable, because people don't want to talk about it. And this facet is our emotions, is our feelings. We have to honor our feelings. And some of you hearing that, you're going to be uncomfortable because your sports team is not the place to talk about your feelings, or your gardening club isn't the place to talk about your feelings. This is something that often, not always, but often is a difference between men and women. Women are more likely to go and confide in their friends at the club they go to every week. Men, no, they're there to play the sport, right? But at the same time, this is part of why the male loneliness epidemic exists. We need to talk about that because being able to confide in our friends, to share what's good and what's not, and sit with those emotions and honor them is a part of seeing the wholeness of another person. And when we're in community with other people, especially the communities I want to help build, the communities that are transformative and authentic and resilient and living, we have to see each other in the wholeness of our being. Not just what we look like, not just what religion we have, not just what our education level is. I don't know if you heard that, but my cat is getting into things and I am going to be... It's fine. I'll deal with it after. But there's all these surface level things that we see about another person, but as soon as we get to that deeper emotional flow, we get uncomfortable and we want to hide or we want to put up walls. And the communities I want to build, the communities I see so many people wanting to build, won't survive that. So, okay, if we're connecting these different elements of communities to elements in the world, our emotions across time and space and cultures are associated with water. Water is flowing, right? Water carves up the landscape through a river. But importantly, in a community sense, water has always been a way to connect over long distances. The oceans were the pathways towards connecting the old and new world, right? Rivers have been used since time immemorial, since forever, to travel and to trade and to connect. And our emotions, like water, allow us to connect. And it's when we're able to sit with someone's emotional reality in this community space, in this container that we're building around a certain intention, that we not only move away from solely connecting based on that intention, but we open the door. I want to find the right words for this. We open the doorway to let those connections deepen in truly transformative and deep ways because humans are incredible in how, and it's probably not just humans, this is just what it's been studied in, but when we see, whether it's on a movie or somebody right in front of us, when we see them experiencing an emotion, that could be happiness, that could be sadness, that can be anger. Our minds, the neurons in our mind, automatically mirror that emotion. We feel that emotion in ourselves. And this is the basis of empathy, of compassion, right? Now, again, that can be uncomfortable because if someone's in pain, we feel that pain. And I know for so many people, especially people who have been raised or socialized to see pain or vulnerability as weakness, they've dammed up, put up a wall, a very strong wall in some cases, so they don't have that feeling. And therefore, their compassion and their ability to actually connect with another person has been damaged. And if we want to build communities that move beyond the, oh, we just happen to live in the same place, or oh, we just happen to like the same sport, we need to tear down those walls and reestablish that emotional connection between us. And that doesn't mean we need to be buddy-buddy or therapists or confidants for every single person around us, but we need to be able to not only share our own emotions, but receive the emotions that others are trying to share with us, because that is the basis of connection. Not from our minds, not from, hey, this is something I'm really interested in, but on a really deeply human level. And I personally, what I've noticed in places where that emotional awareness and intelligence and honoring doesn't exist, communities get stalled. They experience something that activates fear or anger, and rather than understanding that they have to deal with those emotions to move forward, they just choose not to move forward at all. I used to work in climate adaptation for about 3 years, and I loved the work, but this was one of the biggest barriers I found in that work, because climate change is scary. If we're paying attention to the science, if we're paying attention to the patterns, it's a little scary. Not a little scary, it can be a lot scary. But when we don't acknowledge that fear and that grief and that anxiety and that anger, we're not able to move forward with clarity, because those emotions are still existing behind the scenes, but they're paralyzing us. And so when I talk about emotions as a part of community, it is one of the most critical parts of community building in my experience, especially if we want that community to last for generations, to grow and expand in really organic ways. Again, think of water. In an ecosystem that's meant to have water, we'll get to deserts in a second, but in an ecosystem that is meant to have a river flowing or that is meant to absorb floods, if we don't have that water there, that ecosystem dies. And I think also we could tie in here how artificial intelligence, this is a weird metaphor that I did not expect to come up, but it's also very apt. AI systems use an incredible amount of water for the simplest of tasks. And every time we use AI to write an email or generate a picture of a puppy on a trampoline, we are using bottles and bottles of water. Most of these AI data centers are located in places where communities are already marginalized, where their water sources are already compromised. And so this artificial intelligence is using up this water. At the same time, this artificial intelligence is being used by so many people to replace the emotional connections that should exist between us. So not only is there this massive environmental impact caused by AI, but it is massively contributing to community disconnection at the same time. I'll let you draw your conclusions there, because I'm not going to say there isn't ever a reasonable use for AI, but that is a totally different conversation that I'm not going to get into here. So just think about it. If water represents our emotions, how is the use of AI giving us an emotional drought just as much as it is giving us an environmental drought? Now, the final element that we can talk about in this space, in community building, is earth, is that physical element, is embodiment, is our bodies, is the bodies of other people in our community. When we talk about earth and when we talk about balance, oftentimes people think of earth as something static, that it doesn't change. I've grown up rurally. I grew up gardening. I grew up watching the natural ecosystem around me, and anyone else who has had anything like those experiences in their life, whether they've tended to a single garden box or they've lived in a beautiful forest, knows that earth is not stagnant. Earth is constantly turning over through the seasons and through the natural processes that build soil and contribute to the growth of things around us and really give us the ability to live, right? As an element, earth is that physical long-term result of our intentions, of what we've composted or released in ourselves and what that's allowed to grow, what seeds we've planted. And when we're talking about community, when we're talking about how to make communities physical and long-lasting like an ecosystem, like, those old wood forests on the Western coast, we have to consider how we're feeding that community in very tangible ways. And this can be as tangible as actually feeding your community too, right? People are going to show up a lot happier and a lot more grounded and a lot more calm with a full belly. That's proven. That's a fact. And I'm not just saying that because I love food. I think food is such an amazing part of being human. All the different varieties, all the different flavors, all the different ways to nourish ourselves. I truly do believe it's such a beautiful thing. So if you're building community and feeding your community is not a part of that in some capacity, I really encourage you to try just that one strategy. You can take that away and give it a shot. Maybe host a potluck, maybe host a food drive. There's so many ways to go about that. But earth, physical reality, is what lasts. It is the most long-lasting of the four elements. A fire is going to burn out as soon as it doesn't have fuel, which is also material, to burn on. And so with that community intention, it's going to disappear unless we have created these physical systems and structures to support it. Air really, truly requires the cycles of the earth to be cleaned, because as we exhale, the trees inhale and the other plants inhale, and it's that exchange with the physical reality that allows us to even be alive on this planet right now. Water shapes the earth, yes, through the rivers and all that. But again, it's the trees, it's the plants, it's the mountains that shape the water cycles that we have. And I said I'd mention deserts. There are places where water moves in a completely different cycle than it does where I was raised. And so your community doesn't need to be a wetland. It doesn't need to be a floodplain. It doesn't need to be emotional all the time if that's not authentic and true to your intention. But even a desert is going to have rain at some point. Even a desert has water in the morning dew that allows the creatures that live there to survive. So think about that too a little bit. We do need all four elements in some capacity. They're going to play different roles in different places. And that is why I love this so much, is because the elements, whether you're using them from a community perspective or you're going through elements of self, they are going to balance for you, for your community, in a way that is wholly unique and true to you. I know what works for me. I've done the work to continue to learn, and honestly, that balance has shifted and changed as I continue to grow and change as a person. And that's okay. And your communities will too. But it was through understanding myself through that unique ecosystem that is me that I was able to do what I'm doing now for you, that I'm able to connect with people who align to me in the way that really matters, that is really authentic, that is really grounded. Now, this is just one video. And if you're going away from this video with some amazing ideas for your community, whatever that community looks like, I'm so happy. I would love to hear it in the comments if you would like to share. If you're interested in learning more perspectives like this, you can also subscribe so that you don't miss any information like this that you can engage with when it works best for you. But now, if you're watching this and you're like, okay, that all sounds great, that sounds wonderful, that sounds amazing, but I have no idea how to implement it. I have no idea what this looks like for me. I have some exciting news for you. I am currently in the process of developing I really should come up with the titles before I post these videos, but I didn't. It's a community mentorship video course. And so I've talked about two primary resources that already exist in this video: the Transforming Communities Guidebook and the Elements of Self video course. This community mentorship video course marries the two of those amazing and incredible resources to give you a really grounded and embodied understanding of this way of seeing communities, because this is how Vibrant Systems moves forward. And this is what separates my work from any community consultant that you might encounter elsewhere. Now, that video course is going to come out by the end of March. I'll commit to that. By the end of March, that video course is going to be live. Probably sooner, so you probably should also subscribe if you want to know when that video course is released, because I will announce it here. Now, again, if you've done that when it comes out and you're like, okay, this is amazing, I want more. Or if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, the video course sounds good, but I want to start now. I also have one-on-one community mentorship. And this is an opportunity to meet with me directly, to share your vision, your passion, the goals you have around community building, and I help you through this process based on my own experience, based on my understanding, based on my reflections. We go through this process step by step. And in that, I share with you another amazing resource that I love, my Value Identification and Exploration Workbook, which again was transformational for me because it helped me make my values explicit in a really embodied way. So you'll get that, but you'll also get, I think it's 6 hour-long sessions with me to walk you through this process. And it is awesome. If that's something you want to explore in deeper depth, I also have free 20-minute consultation sessions where we can meet, we can chat, we can talk about your goals, about where you are in your journey, and we can help you decide what is the best pathway forward for you into this space. Because I know without a doubt that you wouldn't be watching this video, you wouldn't be dreaming about building communities if you were not meant to do this work. And so whatever way I can help you do it, that makes my soul so happy. That makes my heart sing. My name is Danielle. My mission is to help people deepen their connections to self, to others, and to the environment. And helping you build your communities is exactly how I do that. So again, last time, subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Leave your thoughts below, leave a comment below. Let me know where you're coming from, and let's make your story a vibrant one.